So first of all, thank you so much for coming. I know you just arrived yesterday from all the way from Israel.
All the way,
Yes, sir.
and I thank you.
Yeah, no, I can't tell you how delighted I am because when I was writing about the psychological aspect or dimension of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, obviously I had to do my research. And see, her name came first. And so I was talking to a husband of my niece, David Rabinovich. I don't know if you know him. He's a psychiatrist at Trombone Hospital.
Uh-huh.
And he knows you he knows of you, and he admires you a great deal, really.
Thank you.
So, because as you well know, you are have articulated these thoughts for so many years, there is a significant aspect of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that very few people pay attention to, and that is the psychological aspect of this conflict. Has been going on now for nearly, well, you can say 100 years, since 1917. But before we go into that, let's talk a little bit about what happened recently with Netanyahu's visit to Washington, and specifically the so-called press conference between him and President, I still cannot say President Trump. I don't mind if this is on record.
Okay.
Anyway, between Netanyahu and President Trump.
No self-censorship, right?
No censorship. I'm not a politician. I can say what I want.
Fortunately.
So let me start with your take on what happened. What do you think is how I feel that the visit and the consequence of the visit, for whatever it's worth, made situation worse rather than better.
No, it's absolutely. There is we have to look at this from perspective, and since 2000, if we take longer, Israeli society and Israeli leaders, with one exception of Ben-Meir, the society is moving back to the conflict. And there is, on the one hand, escalation of the conflict. And with the escalation of the conflict comes really change in the ways that the leadership approaches the conflict. We are back probably to the 60s, 70s in the way. And it really accelerated dramatically with the new government of Netanyahu, which is a coalition of extreme right and right. And it's not even really, I think that it's of extreme right, because when you look into Likud, you find that there's really substantial number of leaders from Likud, ministers, MKs, really don't have very different opinions from Bennett, or what we call...
this is true. I mean, yeah.
It's the same. Yeah. They're the same. In fact, very recently they had a full page in Haaretz, if you saw. Many ministers, key players in Knesset saying that we are urging annexation of West Bank.
Outright. I mean, not just Bennett, of course. But you know, what is puzzling about this, and something I've been talking about, hashing it time and again, is what Netanyahu says publicly and what Netanyahu, in fact, is doing on the ground, with the support, of course, of his government. That is, I have taken the position all along that Netanyahu, as prime minister, as individual, he is not and will never commit himself to two-state solution. I think he's against it. And he's doing everything he can, notwithstanding his public announcement and public narrative. He's doing everything he can, if all one has to look is what's going on in the West Bank, to come to the conclusion that Netanyahu is moving in the direction of settling in the West Bank at least 1 million people, 1 million Israelis, and to create irreversible facts on the ground. And that is, for him, that is what is eventually will restore or will allow Israel to gain all of what is termed the land of Israel, the biblical land of Israel. Do you see it the same way?
Oh, absolutely. We have a complete agreement. In fact, I will tell you, I even can tell you that it's based not only on feeling, but on research. One of my students studied speeches of Netanyahu, with his entrance to politics until very recently. And what we find a complete consistency. So the study, particular research, compared Olmert, who changed his view, and him did not, because they come really from a very similar background,
yes.
and it was the same age, so more or less at the same time. So it was very interesting to see how Olmert, you can find cues that he is changing, and he did not. He changed on two issues. One is the story of accepting Oslo Agreement in 96, March, and second one is a two-state solution. And looking deep into the story, as I did, I will tell you in a second, is that there is no, I think, complete dogmatic leader. So leaders, when they are there, as we say, from there you see something that you don't see from outside. You cannot ignore completely the geopolitical situation, pressures, opinions of key leaders in the world. You cannot. So in both cases that he changed his opinion, were under pressure. In accepting Oslo, he accepted it because he saw the polls that I saw, and the poll showed that in order to be elected, he has to accept Oslo. So he accepted Oslo in order to be elected, and as we know, the results were...
But subsequently, he did everything to undermine Oslo.
Exactly.
That's
and even, I will tell
yes.
you more, there is a particular story. The story is of 2008. He visited a settler family, and they asked him, why did you accept Oslo? And he said, okay, I will answer, but shut off all the cameras and all the... And they did it, supposedly, but they did not. And one camera was rolling, video was rolling, and he said very openly that I did all in order to stop and harm Oslo, and I had to accept it. And this is the story. So he was telling the truth.
Yeah.
Was telling the truth. And the same was with the two-state solution by Iran.
Yes.
Under pressure of Obama and obviously previously, he accepted, and then again, he retracted just before the election in 2015.
Exactly. I mean, when he was asked, I'm sure you remember, he said, when someone asked him, would there be in Palestine, he said, under your watch, he said, no, indeed not. So I have never thought for a moment. I want to tell you that I had an encounter with him going back 20 years, 1997. Mm-hmm. The Syrians at the time were interested in actually entering into serious negotiation about the Golan Heights. When finally I saw him and I talked to him about it, he did forget it. Just like, this was his gesture. We are not interested. We are not interested. They're going back now. This is 1 year after he became prime minister.
Right.
This is a man who has grew up on his father's lap, so to speak. Neo-Zionist, hardcore Zionist.
Absolutely.
And he is not going to change his mind. And I think as long as he is in power,
I
there is
agree.
no prospect of a Palestinian state under any circumstances.
His father did not didn't support the peace with Egypt.
Yeah.
So he died. Most of the extreme person in the Israeli politics, although he was not in politics, and he reared up his child in a very authoritative way, and the child accepted, obviously the son, the views. And as we said, just before, it's a fact. It's not really evaluation. So he did not change anything with regard to the view Israel or the Eretz Israel as an exclusive homeland of Jews and only of Jews. He sees Jews as victims, eternal victims, as his father. So he did his studies. He glorifies Jews all the time, the most moral army in the world, the most moral nation in the world, and delegitimizes Palestinians. In fact, some of the labels that he gave them just recently are outraging. He calls them beasts.
Yeah, I mean,
can you imagine? Just reading his, you can see where he's going.
Yeah.
Compare his speeches now to the speeches of Rabin after 1993. It's a difference of light.
A world of difference.
Absolutely different.
He's a hypocrite. I mean, say obviously, he says something one day, next day he changes his mind. He doesn't. When he just mentioned the way he referred to the Palestinian, and the way he said, the most ethical people, our army is the most ethical, when in fact the army itself is subjugating the Palestinian day in and day out, with all the various measures they're taken in the name of national security. I think it's awful. I think that says, portray not just the Israelis, but portray the Jews, because it's somewhere along, this what Israel does impact on world Jewry, how it's been seen by the non-Jews.
Right.
And if there's a rise of anti-Semitism, be that in the United States or in Europe or elsewhere, I think I am absolutely convinced that much of it is ignited because of the Israeli policies in the West Bank, because of the occupation. So they associate Jews to the action of what the Israelis are doing. And so there is, not that anti-Semitism is a new phenomenon, it's always been there. But there is rise in the last several years, specifically in Europe, and now even here in the United States, it is much of it is attributed to the fact that Israel has been occupying other people for 50 years now. 50 years. So it's directly contributing to the anti-Semitism throughout the world. But, there was this press conference. I'd like to get your take on it. American position was all along, under Bush, going Clinton, and then Obama, the two-state solution was the heart of a resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And then comes Mr. Trump. And he says, well, one state, two states, I like it. Whatever they like it, I like it. Now let's take it from there.
It could be a joke,
it is
but since it was said by the President of the United States, it's a very sad statement, which means that the President does not understand well the situation, because saying whatever you want is something that he did not invest enough effort to learn, and to say something about conflict, you have to have some kind of knowledge in order to say something meaningful. Saying something that doesn't have any meaning but opens, maybe, nobody knows even whether it was an accident, whether it was saying, or he actually wanted to say that United States retreats from a very traditional position that only two-state solution is a solution that is acceptable. But nobody knows really even to answer whether it was a joke, serious considerations, and opening a new way, or just, he said because it came to his mind, at the moment.
I mean, but this is, he's now notoriously known to have said something, and tomorrow he changes his mind. If he gave it any thought whatsoever, he probably would say, let me say this, and if they see how it works, and day after tomorrow, a week later, I can change my mind. That I see him as a person who is totally, he's wishy-washy, obviously. He's not a principled. He's not a principled man. I don't think, and I agree with you, he did not really study the intricacies, the complexity of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to understand that this is not just a question of one state, two state. There are massive implications to whichever way one goes. And he demonstrated complete ignorance, total ignorance.
Let's take just two aspects of one state. One is that look at the world, and it's extremely hard to find two ethnic groups that live together in peace, especially after such a bloody struggle. Right. Look what is going on in Rwanda, Tutsi and Hutu, what is going on in Sri Lanka with Sangalis and Tamils. No, India, wherever you go, Kenya, wherever you touch, you see the same problem. So one question is that how two ethnic groups that were in such a bloody conflict can live together. Look what is going on in Belgium even, where it's so difficult. Second problem is that he didn't realize, didn't refer, it's a problem of the nature. So what is going to happen? Will they get full rights? Or what he meant, it will be that it will be apartheid state, because it also can be one state. And both solution, I say it's almost like Sophie choice, both of them terrible, because there is only one solution that can somewhat solve the problem, is two-state solution. Maybe it's not the best one, but clearly it's the least worst one, really, because the other one will put the situation in such a way that Jews will have to decide whether they want to be apartheid state or they want to lose their Jewish nature. So, I mean, to throw a word without any meaning or thinking about the implication is terrible. So the powerful leader of the empire of the present world is talking without any meaning.
Yeah, in today's article, actually, I was talking about this. The two-state solution probably is the lesser of all evils. But the truth of the matter is, when we look at other possible solutions, half a dozen, some Israelis would like to see the Palestinian part of the West Bank join Jordan and create...
so they will vote. With live in the West Bank, but will vote for Jordan. Can you imagine?
Jordan. Israelis would like to see Hamas, Gaza to be a Palestinian state, while they'll take much of the West Bank and let the Palestinians live in cantons and Bethlehem, Hezbollah. That's another solution, so to speak.
Ireland, you know what kind of idea has? The general major in Israel, so they will get Sinai as a state.
Give them Sinai.
Give them Sinai.
But setting all of this aside, not only that there is a lack of understanding, what I think might happen is that he made the situation considerably worse. He basically gave Netanyahu a sort of a green light.
Right. Absolutely.
Go ahead and do. Just don't scream too much about settlement. Do it quietly, basically. Keep expanding, but do it quietly, and you have pretty much a free hand. One state, two state, it doesn't matter. You can handle it, and we're gonna watch your back. That's the impression I got. Do you share the same impression?
Right. Except that I am very curious. What did say the head of the CIA when he was in Ramallah very recently? What was really kind of balancing the story? I don't know what was said.
Well, I can tell you. I can tell you. I spoke day before yesterday to, I don't want to mention his name, in Ramallah, Jordan, he's in the know. And he has a good knowledge of what happened actually at this meeting. And my understanding, what he said, Abbas was totally and completely unequivocal. Two-state is the only way. There is no other way. Hamas and the Palestinian Authority are one people. Hamas is not going to have its own country, its own state. It's going to be Gaza as well as the West Bank as a single Palestinian state. And if there is an agreement on that Hamas will come along and will support that. Notwithstanding what they are saying publicly or otherwise, they are simply not prepared to surrender to the Israeli whims. That was the message it was conveyed to
the guy.
Yes.
But what did he say to them? Do we know?
He basically listened.
Just listened?
He just listened.
Uh-huh.
He just listened and apparently conveyed that to the president. And we saw what came out of that, probably for this reason, and I think there's a clear connection here. For this reason, he's saying one state, two state, because the Palestinians want two state. Israelis would like to gobble up the whole West Bank. So you can have it this way, you can have it this way, which is consistent. This is the biggest joke. Consistent with all of these behind-the-scene negotiations.
Absolutely. I mean, it's... But it is, as you said, a green light. And it's very important because the pressure on Netanyahu is tremendous, which is really in certain way kind of, I would say, almost unpredictable situation. So Netanyahu became in this construction kind of center person, relatively, everything is relatively to the political map.
Yeah.
Because what happened, he is probably, I believe, even more moderate than Levin, than Ikunis, Katz, obviously this, because of the, let's say, because of the responsibility. Not because, ideologically, maybe if he would have a free hand, he would go with them. But he understands that the world is more complex. He meets with leaders personally, hears, in spite of the fact that some of their relationships are very good, like India, China, but he hears a voice. And therefore, he has to keep somewhat balance the situation.
Yeah,
they don't have responsibility and they can push. So Bennett can say whatever he wants. He is not a prime minister.
Exactly. And then that's what he said is for public consumptions. Basically, like I said, I've been saying time and again, to appease the United States, he keeps talking about two-state solution when in fact he's doing everything on the ground to kill the prospect of a two-state solution. I want to ask you, there was a major article published only recently in Haaretz, where actually former Secretary of State John Kerry told the story that he worked out on a comprehensive peace plan that will include the Arab state more or less on the basis of the Arab Peace Initiative with some adjustment in terms of land swap. And he got President of Egypt involved, Sisi, as well as Jordan King Abdullah, and Netanyahu himself, and they met in Aqaba in the middle of 2016. And they hashed this whole plan. And apparently at that time, Netanyahu said, it looks good. And I'll go back, discuss it with my cabinet to take it from there. But of course, he changed his mind 2 days later. And his excuse was, if I accept anything like this, my government will collapse.
Right.
And my government will collapse. And not just because you live there, and you know the reality better than I do, in Israel itself. And here you have a person like Netanyahu saying, my government will collapse, as if he wanted to form a different government who would support a two-state solution, he couldn't. You know he can, right? If you look at the parties, other parties, if they were to join him, Zionist camp, Yesh Atid, Emeritus,
right. But he had to be,
and Kulanu.
You see, I don't know him personally, and I usually have difficulty when I see, as political psychologist, someone tries to analyze his personality, because it's very complicated. But people do say that he has difficulty to be in tension, that he doesn't like to gamble, and doesn't want to take risks. Because in principle, he could, I believe, be de Gaulle, or even Ariel Sharon, who really shook up all the cards and began something new. You are right. He could come to Yesh Atid, he could come to Labour. In fact, he was talking with Labour,
he was talking,
but without any really intention.
Yeah.
He has his constituency, and it really is, the constituency is stable. They support his opinion to some extent here and there, and he feels comfortable with this coalition. Although on personal level, he hates really very much Bennett, and they have a long personal history.
Yeah. Well,
but politics is politics, and probably ideologically he's close to him.
Yeah.
And the games are really...
Well, but he sees Bennett as a competitor to him.
Right. But on personal level. It's not ideological competitor.
Yeah, personal
it's
level.
Really
yes.
on personal level.
I know, absolutely.
And the guy has a personal problem, because if you see, as a prime minister, which probably you should hear different opinions, people are, two observations are very clear. One, that he always surrounds himself with yes-sayers, always with yes-sayers.
Yes.
He doesn't bring anyone that has opinion. In fact, it's very interesting, just a digression, that Trump brought the general master, who supposedly is very independent. So Netanyahu, here we have one difference. Netanyahu would never bring someone like him to his court.
No, absolutely.
And second, that he changes them, as we say, like underwear, very often. So you see people that enter, and then for various reasons they have a quarrel, including Shaked, including Bennett, that worked, and many other, because there are two problems. He needs complete loyalty, and there is another problem. He needs the approval of his wife.
His approval of his wife, and there's the third one, his lust and love for power. He does not want to relinquish power. I want to raise the other question, We know that the Israeli opposition parties have really been unable to organize themselves effectively. That is, yes, they all stand for a two-state solution. I think the Zionist camp does, Yesh Atid does, certainly Emeritus, and even Kulanu will go along with that, which is a part of this current coalition government. So they are not organized. That's one problem. The other problem is the movement, it seems to me, of increasing number of Israelis from left to center and center to the right. Do you see that a trend continuing? Because I feel this way, if the left and the center is not organized, and they have never produced a real practical agenda, how to change the dynamic of the conflict, and to at least make an effort to end it, while at the same time there's increasing number of settlers going to the West Bank, the Israeli public is becoming more and more complacent, right? And many are moving more and more toward the right of center. So if these are the reality, I want to ask you, that's how I see it, where this is going to lead to.
Okay, you are touching on a wider point, moving from the particular situations we're discussing. Israeli society, beginning with 2000, is moving in this direction. So we have two processes. One is escalation of the conflict, except in the very short period of Olmert. And second, what we have is strengthening institutionalization of the system, of the rightist system.
Right.
So it means the following, that the system becomes less tolerant, the system becomes more indoctrinating, the system becomes more closed. So what happens is that people who live in Israel and kind of, I see it as kind of enter into pipeline in certain way, metaphorically, as they are born, are really reared up in a particular climate that is closed-minded. It begins in kindergarten, it continues in the school, they go later to the army. It is related to type of news that they get from newspapers. You have to understand, for example, that really tremendous power of Israel Hayom that can be found everywhere. You are sitting, waiting for a doctor, sitting in a bank, you get the paper for free, and you read the news, thinking that those are the news. People are not really complex thinking or are not well sophisticated, and they accept. And this is the way that the indoctrination works. Therefore, what is going on? You are right. People are moving more and more towards the right because of the new generation. By the way, there is a big difference between the older generation and the younger generation. The older generation is more hawkish, very much. Then you have in the society increase of religious people. Yes. There is a very strong correlation between the religiosity and hawkishness. So what you see...
And the settlement movement to a great extent.
So, but then there is another point.
Yeah.
And this is very important.
Yeah.
The point is that in the struggle within society over the narrative, because there is a struggle between Palestinians and Israelis over narrative, but there is also a struggle within the society. The government tries to tell the story what is going on, and there is alternative story, let's say by peace camp. Netanyahu is extremely successful in delegitimizing the left as a group and their opinion. To the extent that, look what is going on, that people so-called in the center or in the left, like Labour Party, are escaping, like from the fire, not to be labeled as leftists. So Labour Party changed its name and calls itself the Zionistic camp. He, the leader, and the leaders, some of the leaders, are talking very similar in the same way as Netanyahu. And also is doing the same Yesh Atid. So what happened, the alternative opinion became not legitimate. So therefore it's extremely difficult to build a system that will struggle with a hegemonic narrative, which didn't happen during, for example, Rabin time. Because during the Rabin time, there was an alternative narrative which was headed or perpetuated, propagated by Likud, and they were not afraid. You know, they were standing in the street.
So my concern now, is exactly, and I fully agree with you, fully. My concern now, if this trend is to continue, my feeling is that it is entirely possible that we can reach a tipping point where it will become almost impossible to restore conditions that would be conducive to a resumption of serious peace talk that could eventually produce a two-state solution. That is, I think there's a point in time where if this trend continues, that is, the left or so-called left continue to vacillate and unable to organize itself, and there's continuing movement now toward the center and the right of center. There's this ongoing indoctrination, 24 hours a day, by the government, by certain media. What you are seeing now, Israel, and the increasing number of settlers, day in and day out, what you are seeing, all of these trends put together, at a point in time, it will be extremely difficult to stop this train. It's going to continue to move, and then this may very well, I think, could spell the death, complete death of the two-state solution. I mean, it's entirely possible unless something dramatic happens in the next 2, 3, or 4 years.
No, you are right. You say, so on the assumption that the vision of peace, in your view or whatever, or my view, is supposed to come from within. Because what we have to agree is that obviously there are other vectors playing, like for example what Palestinians will do. They are not passive, they may do. And what the world will do, what Europe will do. So we don't know. But if you just focus on Israel, you are right. So at the moment what you see is really a construction of new Israel. Under the pressure of the extreme right, so it really got a dominant place. In fact, Bennett, or settlers if you want, have a hegemonic standing in the Israeli society vis-a-vis the government, vis-a-vis the institutions. They are penetrating into important positions. You know, look at for example, the head of police, the head of Shabak, head of Mossad. You know, those are very important positions. Look what is going on in the, let's say, Ministry of Justice, what is going on in Education Ministry. So this is really the trend. They put their people, they take over the institutions of the country. And so at the moment, by the way, you know, it's really, you know, amongst the Israelis, when we talk, we find only the army as a kind of, especially the high officers are the ones that are, you know, really unexpectedly defending the democracy. Take the example, just a year ago, the Deputy Chief of Staff had a very shocking statement about Israel that becomes more and more similar to Nazism. And it shocked many people, right?
I heard that
was
statement.
very So army, can you imagine? Always a story with the soldier. The army became really the defender of democracy and moral values. But here is the story. As we know, there is a trend in the army, and people from whatever, once they were coming from kibbutzim, left and becomes officers, pilots. It's stopped. So at the moment, in the basic training of officers, about 50% of them, 50% of them are coming from the nationalistic religious sector. So already now we have colonels, we have already brigadiers.
Yes.
So some people are saying that we have about 10 years of time. And within 10 years, it's very possible that most of the generals will be coming from the religious sector, and it will be end of the story.
Then comes the question, and even now I think it's becoming extremely difficult. Suppose there's going to be a need to evacuate some of the settlers. Who's going to do that? I don't think the army will be able to do that. There's a point in time where the army itself is not going to be able to do something which is against its own principles if this trend continues. And I think that's the biggest danger.
No, it's true. So we are approaching the tipping point. So Amona, still they did with the disengagement, but there is one major difference. Amona was about 200, 300. In order to resolve the conflict at the moment, according to the lines of Geneva, Olmert, whatever, there is need to move about between 80,000 to 100,000 people from the inland.
From the settlements that are scattered all over.
So I hear sometimes a statement, so among Israelis, kind of joke, that still is not born a prime minister that will be able to move 100,000. So it's something impossible.
It's impossible, even 100, not to speak of more than that. The other point of concern, that is, if this is the trend, again, this is how I envision, if this were to continue, we're talking before, can we speculate? We can speculate based on what we know today, based on the facts on the ground. So I speculate that given the conditions in Israel today, and given how things evolving and developing, let's leave the Palestinian with very limited options. That is, I don't believe they will sit still for another 5, 10, 15, 20 years and hope that the international community is going to come and save the day. I don't believe that the United States at any point in time is going to put the kind of pressure on Israel to change its ways, with or without Netanyahu, in terms of direct pressure, that coercion, not to speak of other coercive methods. The European may be more inclined or will be more prepared to do that. But even then, it's going to be very, very difficult for them, given the history of the Jews in Europe and all of that, to put that kind of pressure on Israel to make these most painful concessions that need to be made in order to reach an agreement. So that's going to leave us with the Palestinians and the Arab world. What the Palestinians are going to do. Will they be sitting another 10, 15, 20 years and do nothing? My feeling is it's a question of time when there's going to be massive explosion of sorts. Way, way bigger than the Second Intifada, if things don't change. Do you share this view?
Yeah, I share, I don't know when, but looking, again, history, look at the history of Poland, Hungary, Chechen, Czech, whatever. Eventually, occupied nations rose and rebelled, all of them. Poles rebelled 3 times, and Hungarians rebelled. it takes time. Obviously, Irish had number of rebellions, so it will. It takes time, sometimes longer, because each rebellion, the last one was very costly to Palestinians. I think it's about 2,500.
Yeah, but at one point, when they have nothing left to lose.
Right.
I mean, this is where I think, they paid a great deal, the very costly to Second Intifada in the year 2000. And that was also was a turning point for the Israelis in a major way, psychologically speaking, specifically. Mm-hmm. Look what we've done and look what we got in return. So having said that, the Palestinians today, as their conditions getting worse by the day, they will be prepared to make similar or even greater sacrifices in order to achieve something. So what is going to stop them actually when they have very little left to lose? That's how I see it. And this is a question of when they will galvanize their forces. And doesn't have to be even organized, I don't think. Sometimes it could be sparked somewhere. And then it's going to assume its own momentum.
It's true, like happened in 87. Yeah. The accident that with 7 Palestinians in Gaza, so eventually evokes. It's true. I think that those events are unexpected. Usually, as we said, certain the event of nobody thought that in 87 there would be uprising. People thought so. It can happen, and as we agree, that when you look at the rules of history, this is what happens.
Yeah.
So it happened everywhere. It will happen probably here. Now, it's interesting that you say United States will not press, but when I look on the pressure of United States, many of the cases, it comes very late. We have to remember that, let's say, boycott of South Africa is the United States entered into boycott only in 89. Only in 89, when Europe was boycotting for a long period of time. So returning now to the point of what you said, I think, this is again assumption, ways of the world is moving, the importance of human rights, etc. Talking with a lot of people in parliaments, etc. I think that slowly, the feeling of guilt is dissipating, and I think that there is a very strong roots in Europe against that object to the continuation of the occupation.
No, I agree.
From the moral point of view.
Yeah, in Europe, yes.
It's really stronger in the civil societies than in the government.
Very true.
So what happened, so at the moment, I just had a tour, met with officials in Germany, and they kind of, from the formal point of view, they will not change dramatically. But I am asking myself, as it happened is with regard to South Africa, so people will become more involved, and it will become also internal issue, as it happens sometimes. So it are not only internal issues, but some of the external issues become internal issues. Yeah. So I predict that within reasonable time there will be pressure, and I think
there will be pressure. I don't know if it's going to be similar to what happened against South Africa.
Yeah, probably
it's going to be somewhat different, because again, the black in South Africa did not go through a Holocaust, so to speak. There is that sense of guilt, and I agree with you. That sense of guilt is dissipating in Europe as well here in the United States. That is, for how many generations we're supposed to feel guilty? Israel is a powerful country. It's a nuclear power. It is economically is a thriving state.
And it's perpetrating.
And why should we now feel guilty when in fact Israel has become the perpetrator, the occupier of other lands and other people? That is beginning to resonate. I see it in Europe. Every time I go to Brussels, Paris, I see it. It's very clearly. It's resonating, and they are against what Israel is doing, and they are expressing that. And I agree with you, the government, not as much as the government, but the civil society, they've had it. They're saying we've had it with the situation. The main concern also they have is that they see the conflict in Israel as one that precipitates instability and violence throughout the region. So it's not limited to the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Right, that's a very important point.
Yeah, but as long as the Palestinians are unhappy and their situation is dire, that is also creating frenzy and violence and other places in the Middle East. And so from the European perspective, settling the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a prerequisite. That is because they're suffering from radicalization. They're suffering from violence. They're suffering, they're on the forefront, so to speak. And so I think the pressure is going to come more from Europe to start with. But that's maybe necessary for the United States eventually to wake up and say enough is enough, not for the purpose of just pressuring Israel, but I think for the purpose of saving Israel from itself.
Here we are touching exactly, what I'm trying to do with CISO. So I believe that there is one more vector, and those are Jews around the world.
Yes.
Traditionally, Jews around the world, in terms of values, they are more liberal than many other communities, white communities. They were at the front in South Africa. They were in the front here with civil rights, and they have. This is in the United States. This is the most liberal community. They know what human rights are about. And I believe that they worry. They worry because they see two problems.
Oh, yes.
Because we are focusing on the conflict, but we did not talk, and we should mention that the conflict by its nature affects very much not only the occupied society, but also the occupying society.
Oh, no question.
Right. It is by its nature. So what happened is that the occupying society necessarily is deteriorating in terms of democracy. There are other costs, because if you want, if you want to block an alternative information, or you want to struggle with a narrative, you have to exercise some kind of measures that are anti-democratic by nature, because democracy by its nature has to be pluralistic, and it has to allow free flow of information. Israel does not allow free flow of information, because it doesn't want that an alternative information will penetrate into the public. So they see and they worry what is going on. And this is what CISO is an organization called Save Israel, exactly from itself, stop the occupation, because of the tourism, because of the costs that the Israeli society is paying, and of course the Palestinians are paying. They pay a tremendous price, and only ending the occupation will save Israel from the cancer that already is extending in the society.
The only problem, I agree 100%. I just want to make a note about one other final point on this American Jews or Jews around the world, specifically in the large communities like in Britain and France. So far, they have not been as critical, at least publicly, about Israel. And when there is serious discussion and conflict, they do it usually quietly. They talk between them, they go to Israel, they talk to the government. But I think there's going to be a time when the Jews, specifically in the United States, will no longer want to continue to defend themselves and defend Israel, because they're getting tired. They're getting very tired of this. They're becoming always on the defensive, trying to justify or explain, to say the least, what the misdeed that Israel is doing day in and day out. I think there's also a point in time where the Jews around the world, and perhaps this is probably the major force that could affect a change eventually in the Israeli policies, if the Jews around the world wake up and say, we cannot allow this country that we've been waiting for so many centuries to destroy itself, and with that will have a massive impact on world Jewry, on the very existence of the Jews around the world.
Yeah, right. You are touching it, because the existence of Israel in the way, one way or another, it impinges on a very core of social identity of Jews.
Exactly.
So if, I am a Jew and I am ashamed of something that is supposed to represent me, and the point is that we already mentioned, and I wanted just to emphasize, Netanyahu is one of the first, of the prime minister that says that Israel represents. He represents Jewry.
The world Jewry.
In fact, when he said the statement, when I came to visit President Holland, I not only came as Israeli, but I came representing all the Jews around the world.
Well, he should know that he does not represent me. And he should know that he does not represent American Jews.
Not many, some here present.
And time has come for him to wake up. I honestly would like to end this session in particular saying one thing, that I want to air it regardless. I think the most dangerous man today to Israel's future is Netanyahu himself. And that is very, very sad thing to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.